You don't belong here. This is a members-only lounge. I'm going to need you to leave." The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look up from his phone. "I have a membership," he said quietly. "Sir." The club manager's tone sharpened, the way it does when someone with a name tag decides they have power. "I'm going to need to see some ID, and frankly, I'm not sure a day pass covers access to this level." "I don't have a day pass." "Then what exactly do you have?" The man finally looked up. His eyes were calm. Steady, the kind of steady that takes years to build. "I have a founding membership," he said. "Since 2009. The manager almost laughed. Almost. "Let me tell you what happened that Tuesday morning at the Ridgecrest Club in downtown Toronto. Because what started as one man being asked to leave a private lounge ended with an entire board of directors on an emergency call, a general manager packing his desk by noon, and a name that nobody in that building had bothered to learn becoming the only name anyone could talk about. But first, let me take you back to where it really began. Kwame Asante Briggs was 41 years old, with close-cropped hair going gray at the temples and the kind of face that doesn't give anything away. Medium build, dark complexion. On the morning in question, he was wearing a faded University of Waterloo hoodie, dark jeans, and running shoes that had seen better days. No briefcase, no watch worth mentioning. Nothing about Kwame Asante Briggs announced itself. That was entirely by design. Kwame had grown up in Brampton, the third of 4 kids, in a house where the heat sometimes didn't work in January and dinner was sometimes whatever his mother could stretch from a can of lentils and whatever vegetables were marked down at the Freshco. His father had driven a TTC bus for 27 years. His mother had worked nights at a dry cleaning facility in Mississauga until her hands cracked so badly in winter she had to tape them before her shift. Kwame had paid for university through a combination of scholarships, student loans, and 40-hour weeks at a factory in Brampton that stamped out car parts. He'd graduated in electrical engineering, taken a job at a small tech firm in Kitchener, worked until midnight most nights for 3 years, built something. Sold it, built something else, sold that too. By the time he was 34, he had co-founded a cybersecurity company called North Shield Analytics. By 37, North Shield had contracts with 4 provincial governments, 2 major Canadian banks, and a federal department whose name he wasn't allowed to say out loud in public. By 40, the company had been acquired in a deal that various financial publications described, with their characteristic restraint, as significant. Kwame Asante Briggs didn't care what they called it. He had grown up with nothing, and he had built something, and the number on the paper was a number his father could not have imagined while sitting behind the wheel of a bus at 5 a.m. on a February morning in Scarborough. He did not talk about any of this. He did not need to. The Ridgecrest Club was a private, professional, and social club on Bay Street, the kind of place where deals got done over single malt scotch and where half the Bay Street power brokers had their real meetings, the ones that didn't go in any calendar. Kwame had been a founding member since the club's early days, back when the original ownership group had approached him personally and asked him to join. He'd agreed partly for the networking, partly because the building had an excellent reading room on the 4th floor, with deep leather chairs and a window that faced west, and partly because the annual membership fee was, at that point, genuinely a stretch, and stretching toward things that scared him a little was something Kwame had always believed in. He visited infrequently, once a month, sometimes less. He had no interest in being seen. He just liked the reading room. That Tuesday, he arrived at 9:15 a.m., carrying a paperback novel and a manila folder full of documents he needed to review before a meeting that afternoon. He took the elevator to the 4th floor, walked down the carpeted hallway toward the lounge entrance, and was stopped at the door. The man who stopped him was Terrence Pollard, 48 years old, sandy-haired, with the particular pink of a man who spent his weekends on a golf course without enough sunscreen. Terrence had been the Ridgecrest Club's general manager for 14 months. He wore a blazer with the club crest on the breast pocket and a lanyard with his photo ID, and the word management printed beneath his name in capital letters. He'd come up through hospitality, hotel management in Calgary, then a stint at a private club in Oakville that had eventually let him go for reasons he didn't discuss at job interviews. Terrence had a certain instinct about people. He was proud of it. He could tell, he often said within about 30 seconds, who belonged somewhere and who didn't. When Kwame stepped off the elevator, Terrence's instinct fired immediately. The hoodie, the running shoes, the lack of anything that looked like it cost money. No tie, no leather bag, no visible markers of the kind Terrence had learned to scan for in the 14 months he'd been standing, metaphorically or literally, at various doors. "Excuse me." Terrence stepped into Kwame's path before he reached the lounge entrance. "This is a members-only floor." Kwame stopped. "Yes, I know. Do you have a guest pass? Because guests need to be signed in downstairs at reception." "I'm not a guest." Terrence's smile stayed fixed. The practiced, professional smile of a man who had learned to make the exclusion feel like a favor. "I understand, but I'm going to need to verify that. If you could come with me downstairs, we can sort this out at the front desk." Kwame looked at him, patient, like a man who had been through this before. "I have a founding membership. My name is in your system." "What's the name?" "Asante Briggs. Kwame Asante Briggs." Terrence didn't move, didn't reach for the tablet on the podium beside him where member records were accessible. He looked Kwame up and down once more. The hoodie, the worn runners, the paperback novel. "I'll need to check with our membership coordinator. If you could just wait." "You have a tablet right there," Kwame said evenly. "My membership number is RC00047. Terrence's smile tightened. "Sir, our policy is that unverified individuals on the 4th floor need to be accompanied by staff to reception while we confirm." "RC0047, Kwame repeated. "The 47th founding membership ever issued by this club. My photograph is in the system. My contact information is in the system. The chair I've sat in once a month for over a decade in that reading room is, in fact, in that room right now." From somewhere behind Terrence, a voice, "Is there a problem?" The voice belonged to Daphne Kiru Walsh. 32 years old, black with natural hair and round wire-framed glasses, a cardigan the color of mustard, and the clipboard she always carried because she was the one who actually knew where everything was. Daphne was the club's member relations coordinator and had worked at Ridgecrest for 6 years. She had met Kwame Asante Briggs 11 times. She knew his face. She knew his membership number. She knew he took his coffee black and occasionally asked if the reading room window could be opened a crack and always said, "Thank you by name to whoever brought him anything." She came around the corner and stopped when she saw him. Mr. Asante Briggs. Recognition, relief, and then something else, the uncomfortable awareness of what she was looking at. "I'm so sorry, I was just down the hall." "Daphne." Quam's voice was warm. "Good morning." Terrence turned to look at her. Something shifted in his expression. "You know this gentleman?" "He's a founding member," Daphne said. "RC0047. He's been a member longer than I've worked here." Terrence didn't miss a beat. He was good at not missing beats. "I was simply following protocol." Unaccompanied individuals without visible ID. "His photo is on the screen right there," Daphne said, and her voice was very quiet. She nodded toward the tablet on the podium. Terrence glanced at it. The screen had timed out. Kwame watched him. He said nothing. "Well." Terrence straightened his blazer. "I apologize for the confusion. You're of course welcome to." "I'd like to go sit in the reading room," Kwame said. "That's all I came for." He walked past Terrence without waiting. Daphne stepped aside. Terrence stood in the hallway with his hands clasped in front of him and his smile gone. In the reading room, Kwame sat in his usual chair, the west window. He opened his paperback. He set the manila folder on the side table. He did not move for several minutes. He just sat there in the quiet. Then he took out his phone. Now let me tell you about what was happening on the other side of the building at the same moment. Because there were 2 separate conversations occurring simultaneously, and both of them matter. The first was at the fourth-floor reception desk, where Terrence Pollard had pulled Daphne aside and was explaining, in a careful managerial tone, that while he understood she had a familiarity with long-standing members, protocol existed for a reason. Anyone who arrived without visible identification, regardless of how well known they might be to junior staff, needed to be verified through proper channels. He was sure she understood. She did understand. She understood everything about the conversation she was having. The second conversation was the one Kwame was having on his phone, in the reading room, in a chair no one had ever asked him to vacate before today. The person on the other end of that call was a woman named Constance. Not the Constance you might know, but a different one. Wait. The person on the other end of that call was a woman named Sylvia Tran Ashford. 55 years old, Vietnamese-Canadian, silver-streaked hair she kept in a severe bun, reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck because she was always losing them otherwise. Sylvia was the chair of the Ridgecrest Club's board of directors. She had held that position for 8 years. Before that, she'd been a partner at a Bay Street litigation firm for 15 years, and before that, she had clerked for a Supreme Court justice. And she had a reputation for precision that her colleagues described as, depending on how well they liked her, either impeccable or terrifying. She and Kwame had served on the same charitable board for 4 years. She respected him enormously. He trusted her completely. When her phone rang and she saw his name, she answered on the second ring. Kwame, what's happening? Good morning, Sylvia. I'm sitting in the reading room at Ridgecrest. I wanted to let you know I was stopped at the lounge entrance this morning and asked to prove I had a right to be on the 4th floor. A pause. By whom? Your general manager. Another pause. Longer. Terrence Pollard. I believe so. Yes. Sylvia's reading glasses slid off her nose. She caught them automatically by the chain. Are you still there? I'm in my chair. I have a book and a folder of documents. I'm quite comfortable. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. She hung up. She opened her laptop. She pulled up the club's member records, found RC0047, looked at the photograph, and then sat very still for a moment. Then she opened a different file. Terrence Pollard's employment record, which she had access to as board chair. She read for approximately 90 seconds. Then she picked up her phone again. She did not call Kwame back first. She called the club's executive director, then the deputy chair of the board. Then she forwarded one specific line from Terrence Pollard's employment record to 3 people simultaneously, with no additional commentary, because the line said everything it needed to say. His previous position, Oakville Harbor Club. Reason for departure. Conduct inconsistent with club values following multiple member complaints regarding discriminatory treatment. Meanwhile, Terrence Pollard was having what he considered a fairly ordinary morning. He had handled the situation. There had been a misunderstanding. He had apologized. The member, whoever he was in the reading room now, and the incident was closed. This was the nature of club management. Occasionally you had to make a judgment call. Occasionally, the judgment call turned out to be unnecessary. That was fine. He had been firm, he had been professional, and he had maintained the standard of the club. He was thinking about this when Daphne appeared in his office doorway. Mr. Pollard. Her voice was the careful neutral of someone who has decided in advance that they will not let anything show. You have a call from Sylvia Tran Ashford. Terrence looked up. The board chair? She'd like to speak with you. She said it's not urgent, but she'd appreciate it before noon. He nodded. I'll call her back after the staff briefing. Daphne looked at him for 1 beat longer than was necessary. She said before noon, she repeated, and left. Terrence called Sylvia Tran Ashford at 11:40. The conversation lasted 6 minutes. He remembered almost none of it afterward, not because his memory was poor, but because the brain has a way of smoothing over the moments that reshape everything. What he remembered, Sylvia's voice, precise and quiet. The way she said RC0047 as though the number itself were an indictment. The way she said founding member and let the 2 words take up the whole room. The way she asked him, with genuine curiosity, whether, when he made the decision to intercept a member on a members-only floor, he had formed that decision based on the member's dress, and how he had answered, and how the silence after his answer had lasted long enough that he could hear the clock on his wall. He did not go back to the lounge that day. In the reading room, Kwame turned a page. He was not thinking about Terence Pollard. He was not thinking about Sylvia Tran Ashford or the board or what would or wouldn't happen next. He was not angry. He had been angry once about things like this, a long time ago. He had been 23 and sitting in a bank in Mississauga and watching the loan officer's eyes go somewhere else, somewhere that was not looking at him, and he had felt the anger like a coal in his chest. He was not 23 anymore. He was thinking about his father. His father had retired 4 years ago. He had a small garden now in the backyard of the house in Brampton, and he grew tomatoes and bitter greens and a pepper he'd brought over in seed form from Ghana 30 years ago, and that his mother still dried and ground by hand. His father got up at 5 every morning, not because he had anywhere to be, but because 40 years of early shifts had made his body forget how to sleep past dawn. He walked to the park. He came home. He tended the garden. He drank 1 cup of very strong tea with evaporated milk and watched the birds at the feeder outside the kitchen window. Kwame paid off his parents' mortgage in 2019. He had not told them in advance. He had just arranged it and then told his mother on the phone one afternoon, and she had been so quiet for so long that he thought the call had dropped, and then he heard her crying, and he had held the phone and not said anything, and let her cry, because she had earned every single one of those tears. His father had called that evening. His father did not cry. His father said, simply, "You did good, Kwam." And then, "How are your running shoes? You never buy yourself good shoes." Kwame looked down at his running shoes now. They were, honestly, pretty worn down. He closed his book around his finger, looked out the west window at the Toronto skyline, gray and cold and enormous and his, in whatever way a city can belong to someone who came up through it the hard way. His phone buzzed. A text from Sylvia. "Board has been informed. Emergency session called for this afternoon. You don't need to do anything." He texted back, "Thank you. I'm going to finish my chapter." She sent back a single period. He'd always liked that about her. The emergency board meeting took place at 3 o'clock that afternoon in the club's private conference room on the 2nd floor. Sylvia Tran Ashford chaired it. 8 of the 11 board members attended in person. 3 joined by video call. The meeting ran for 1 hour and 40 minutes. What came out of it was this: Terence Pollard was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a formal review. A third-party investigator from an HR consultancy on King Street was retained by end of business. Every formal complaint from the past 14 months, there were 7, it turned out, all from members or guests who were not white, all involving Tessence in some capacity, was pulled from the files and passed to the investigator. The board also voted to commission a full review of front-of-house protocols, staff training materials, and the membership intake process. It was, in institutional terms, swift. Institutions are not usually swift. The swiftness had everything to do with a single document that Sylvia had forwarded before the meeting began. Terence Pollard's file from Oakville. The part about conduct inconsistent with club values. The part that someone had not checked carefully enough when they hired him. Daphne Kiru Walsh was asked if she wanted to make a formal statement. She said yes. She sat with the investigator for 2 hours the following day and told him everything she had seen in 6 years. She was calm and thorough, and she brought her clipboard with her personal notes, because she had, as a matter of habit she had developed entirely on her own, been keeping a log. People notice things. They always notice. Sometimes they just need someone to finally ask. Kwame Asante Briggs left the reading room at 2:30, before the board meeting began. He had read 4 chapters, reviewed his documents, and had a second cup of coffee that Daphne brought without being asked because she remembered. He walked out through the lobby of the Ridgecrest Club onto Bay Street, into the October cold, pulling his hoodie tighter. The city moved around him. Couriers on e-bikes threading through traffic, a food truck with a lineup at the corner, a woman in a hard hat coming out of a construction office with a coffee in each hand and a phone tucked under her ear. He walked 2 blocks north to where his car was parked. He drove himself. He had always driven himself. His phone rang. His assistant, Priya? No, wait, his assistant. A woman named Meg Calloway Pierce. She had 2 questions about the afternoon meeting. He answered both. She asked if there was anything else. He said no, and then said yes, actually. Could she please order him a new pair of running shoes, something decent, his size, and have them sent to his parents' house? His mother could give them to his father to pass along. Meg Calloway Pierce said she would take care of. He drove north on the 400 toward a meeting that had nothing to do with any of this. The formal investigation took 3 weeks. Terrence Pollard did not return from administrative leave. His employment was terminated at the conclusion of the review. The letter cited a pattern of conduct inconsistent with the club's values of dignity and equal welcome for all members, as well as the undisclosed history from his prior position that the club's HR process had failed to surface at the time of hiring. 5 of the 7 complaints were substantiated. The other 2 were inconclusive due to lack of documentation, which was itself noted as a process failure. The club issued a formal apology to each member who had filed a complaint. Kwame Asante Briggs received his in writing. It was 3 paragraphs. The second paragraph was the one that mattered, an unambiguous acknowledgement that what happened on the 4th floor that Tuesday morning was wrong, that it was rooted in an assumption that should never have been made, and that the responsibility for correcting the conditions that allowed it rested with the institution, not with the member who had been subjected to it. He read it once. He folded it and put it in the manila folder that he had not, in the end, needed at the afternoon meeting because his counterpart had already agreed to the terms before Kwame finished his second sentence. He did not post about any of it. He did not give interviews. He did not need the story to belong to him in public. But Daphne Kiru Walsh mentioned it, carefully and without naming names, in a professional development talk she gave to a hospitality industry group in February. She talked about what it means to know your members, what it means to actually know them, not their face on a system screen, their names, what they take in their coffee. The fact that they always say thank you. She talked about what it means to notice and to log what you notice, and to be ready to say what you know when the moment comes. The talk was well received. Several people came up to her afterward. One of them was a woman who managed a private club in Vancouver who said she was going to go home and retrain her entire front-of-house team. These things move slowly, but sometimes they move. 6 months after that Tuesday morning, Kwame Asante Briggs walked back into the Ridgecrest Club on Bay Street. October had become April. The lobby had the early spring light in it, pale and watery and trying. There was a new sign near the front entrance, small and dignified, dark text on a cream background. The Ridgecrest Club is committed to the equal dignity and welcome of all its members. Discrimination in any form will not be tolerated. He took the elevator to the 4th floor. At the lounge entrance, there was no one posted. There was a small sign-in tablet and a note asking members to check in digitally. Simple, discreet, respectful. He pressed his thumb to the screen, RC0047. The screen confirmed his membership and welcomed him by name. He went to the reading room, his chair, the west window, the Toronto skyline, now with a thin line of green coming in at the edges where the trees along the ravines were beginning to bud. He sat down. He opened his book. He ordered a coffee from a young man whose name tag read Marcus. No, wait, whose name tag read. A young man whose name tag he read and whose name he said back to him when he said thank you. The young man smiled. People always smile when you use their name. It costs nothing. Kwame settled back into the leather chair. The afternoon light came through the west window, warm on his sleeve. He exhaled. This is what normal is supposed to feel like. Just a man in a chair he belongs in, reading a book in a city he helped build, being treated like a person. It shouldn't be remarkable. One day it won't be. I want to ask you something before you go. If you had been in that lobby, if you had seen a man stopped at a door he had every right to walk through, if you had been Daphne, watching it happen from down the hall, would you have said something? Would you have brought your clipboard and your 6 years of careful notes and sat across from the investigator and told him everything you knew? Or would you have decided it wasn't your place? Because this story didn't change because of Kwame's power. It changed because Kwame was calm enough to make a phone call, and because Daphne was brave enough to know what she'd seen and say it clearly. And those are two very different kinds of courage. Both of them matter. Both of them were necessary. Justice doesn't always arrive clean, but sometimes it does. If this story made you feel something, angry, hopeful, a little of both at once, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. There's someone in your life who has been stopped at a door they had every right to walk through. Maybe they need to know they're not alone. Like, subscribe, and leave me your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And I'll see you in the next story.